Okay, so you're here because you want to grasp complex topics, but let's face it, you want the efficient route, right?
Uh-huh, exactly. Time is valuable.
Totally. And that's what we're doing. You send over some great material about how Bitcoin's, well, evolving. We're going to cut through the noise and focus on what's really key.
Yeah, the big question we're diving into today is basically, how is Bitcoin adapting? How's it scaling up for potentially wider use, new applications, but, and this is crucial, without ditching its core ideas?
Right. Keeping that original promise. So
Yeah.
we've got these articles, some analyses. Our job is to pull out the main threads, give you that clear picture.
Without getting bogged down in, super technical weeds.
Exactly. We want those aha moments.
Yeah.
You gave us the stuff. We're highlighting what matters for you.
And the whole story really starts with Bitcoin's initial design choices. There was a trade-off right from the beginning. Security, number one. Decentralization, absolutely critical. No single point of control. But that focus, well, it came with the natural bottleneck.
Okay, let's unpack that a bit. It's that classic blockchain trilemma, isn't it? Security, decentralization, scalability. Pick two, maybe.
Sort of, yeah. Bitcoin went hard on security and decentralization. Awesome for trust, but it meant the base layer wasn't built for, like, millions of tiny transactions per second.
More like, what, 3 to 7 transactions per second globally?
Something in that ballpark, yeah. And when lots of people wanted to transact at once, that limited space got, well, expensive. Fees went up.
Which isn't great if you're thinking about buying coffee with it.
Precisely. So that limitation, that's the fundamental driver behind all these developments we're going to talk about.
Got it. So instead of completely rewriting Bitcoin, a lot of the action has been about building on top of it. Layer 2 solutions, they call them?
Exactly. Layer 2. And the Lightning Network is probably the biggest name in that space right now.
Okay, Lightning. So what's the core idea there? How does it work?
Think of it like running a bar tab or a coffee shop tab, like you said. You open a tab, you buy a few drinks, maybe some snacks.
Right, multiple small purchases.
But you only actually settle the final bill once at the end, right? Lightning's kind of similar for Bitcoin.
Okay, so how does that translate technically?
Well, two people, or entities, they can lock some Bitcoin into a special kind of shared wallet. It uses something called a 2-of-2 multi-signature address. Think of it as a joint safe deposit box requiring both keys.
Right, both need to agree.
Exactly. So once this payment channel is open and funded, they can send Bitcoin back and forth between themselves almost instantly. And crucially, these back and forth payments, they don't get broadcast to the main Bitcoin blockchain.
Ah, so they're happening off-chain within that channel, like scribbling IOUs on the bar tab.
That's a great analogy, just updating the balance between them. Then, whenever they decide they're done, they close the channel, and only the final settlement, the net result of all those off-chain transactions, gets recorded on the main Bitcoin blockchain.
Okay, that makes sense. So the benefits must be
huge, potentially. Speed is one. We're talking settlement in milliseconds, not minutes.
wow.
Fees are another. Because you're not competing for that limited main chain block space for every little payment, the fees can be incredibly low, like fractions of a cent. Satoshis.
Pennies or less, yeah.
And the theoretical capacity. Because it's off-chain, the network could potentially handle, millions of transactions per second. It really opens the door for Bitcoin as everyday digital cash.
Millions per second is a world away from 3 to 7. That's transformative.
It is. And these channels aren't just isolated pairs, they form a network.
So you don't need a direct channel with everyone.
Exactly. Your payment can be routed, sort of hop through interconnected channels to reach someone you're not directly connected to, like finding a path through the network.
Okay, that sounds powerful. But there have to be challenges, right? It can't be that simple.
No, definitely not. It's still evolving technology. One big area is managing liquidity in those channels.
Meaning you need enough Bitcoin on your side of the channel to send, and the other person needs enough capacity to receive.
Precisely. Keeping channels balanced can be tricky. Also, traditionally, you needed to be online or have something watching your channels for you to reliably receive payments. That's getting easier, but it's a factor.
Okay.
And routing, especially for larger payments, can sometimes be difficult. Finding a path with enough liquidity across multiple hops isn't always straightforward.
Makes sense. So it's better suited for smaller, more frequent payments.
Generally, yes, that's where it shines right now. But remember, it's under constant development. We're seeing wallets like Strike, Phoenix, Wallet of Satoshi, making it way more user-friendly.
Abstracting away the complexity.
Yeah. And there are services like Lightning Labs Pool that help manage that liquidity issue. The growth is there. I think the network capacity was over 4,500 Bitcoin recently. It's really unlocking that micropayment potential.
Okay, so Lightning is key for payments. But you mentioned other layer 2 approaches, sidechains and federations.
Right. These are basically parallel blockchains that are connected or pegged to the main Bitcoin chain. They allow for different features or trade-offs. Let's talk about the Liquid network first.
Liquid, I've heard that mentioned mainly in the context of exchanges and traders.
That's exactly its niche. Liquid is a federated sidechain. It's designed for speed and confidentiality, things that financial institutions really value.
Federated, meaning it's not fully decentralized like Bitcoin itself.
Correct. Instead of miners all over the world, Liquid relies on a specific group of trusted entities. They call them functionaries, mostly exchanges, brokers, financial institutions.
Okay, so a bit more centralized. What's the payoff for that trade-off?
Speed is a big one. Liquid has block times of just 1 minute.
Compared to Bitcoin's average of 10 minutes, that's a big difference for traders moving fence.
Huge, near instant finality. And another massive feature is confidential transactions.
Hiding the details.
Exactly. On Liquid, the amount of Bitcoin being sent and even the type of asset, because Liquid can support other things like stablecoins, can be kept hidden on the chain.
That's big for institutional privacy, I imagine. You don't want competitors seeing your every move.
Absolutely. So Liquid enables faster inter-exchange transfers, private trading activity, and even issuing other assets like tokenized securities, all pegged back to Bitcoin's value.
So super useful for that specific financial ecosystem. But the trade-off is that reliance on the federation, that group of functionaries.
That's the key trade-off. It sacrifices some decentralization for speed and confidentiality. So its adoption is strong within its target market traders, exchanges, but you don't see it much outside of that.
Okay. What about RSK then? Rootstock, that sounds different.
It is. RSK's focus is bringing smart contracts like the ones on Ethereum to the Bitcoin ecosystem. It's also a sidechain.
Smart contracts on Bitcoin. How does that work?
Well, RSK is designed to be compatible with the Ethereum virtual machine, the EVM.
So Ethereum developers could potentially build on RSK without learning a whole new system.
Pretty much, yeah. It lowers the barrier for bringing those kinds of decentralized applications, or dApps, over. Think DeFi, decentralized finance, but ultimately secured by Bitcoin.
Secured by Bitcoin? How?
Through something called merged mining. It's clever. Bitcoin miners can essentially mine both Bitcoin and RSK at the same time using the same computing power.
So RSK sort of piggybacks on Bitcoin's massive mining security.
Exactly. It leverages that existing security infrastructure. And RSK also has faster block times than Bitcoin, around 30 seconds or so.
Interesting. So it offers potential for DeFi on Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Has it seen massive uptake compared to, say, Ethereum's DeFi scene?
It has a dedicated community and some interesting projects, but, well, let's be honest, it hasn't reached the same scale or network effect as DeFi on Ethereum. Still developing, you could say.
Right. Now, one more sidechain concept mentioned was drive chains. Sounds more futuristic.
Yeah, drive chains are more of a proposal, an idea being actively discussed. It's not implemented yet. The concept is fascinating, though.
How would they work?
The idea is to enable these sidechains through a Bitcoin soft fork, a backward-compatible upgrade. And the key part is that Bitcoin miners would essentially vote to approve the movement of Bitcoin between the main chain and these specialized drive chains.
Miners voting on fund movement. Okay.
Well, what's the
flexibility? It could allow for tons of experimentation. You could have side chains with radically different rules or features, all pegged to Bitcoin without needing consensus to change Bitcoin's core code for every new idea, like sandboxes for innovation.
It does sound powerful, but I feel a but coming.
Well, there's definitely debate. The main concern revolves around miner influence. Giving miners that power to control the flow of funds to and from sidechains, some worry it could lead to too much centralization or potential conflicts of interest.
Right, empowering miners even further. Exactly. So it's a really interesting idea with potential, but also significant governance questions. It's still very much in the research and discussion phase.
Okay, so that covers building on top of Bitcoin. But you mentioned Bitcoin itself has changed. Protocol upgrades. SegWit was a big one, right?
Huge. Segregated Witness, or SegWit, activated back in 2017. It was a pretty fundamental change to how transaction data is structured.
Segregated Witness. Separating the witness data. What's witness data?
It's basically the signature part of the transaction, the proof that you're authorized to spend the Bitcoin. SegWit essentially moved this signature data outside the main block of transaction information, but still linked to it.
Okay, sounds technical. Why was that separation so important?
Two main reasons. First, it fixed a long-standing bug called transaction malleability.
Malleability.
Yeah, it was a slight vulnerability where someone could technically change the ID of a transaction before it was confirmed without invalidating the transaction itself. It sounds minor, but it made building complex things like Lightning Network channels much harder and riskier. SegWit fixed that.
Ah, so it cleared the path for Lightning. That's major.
Definitely. The second big benefit was capacity. By moving the signatures out, it effectively freed up space within the traditional 1 MB block size limit.
So even though the official limit didn't change, you could fit more actual transaction data in.
Exactly. They introduced a new concept called block weight, and the limit allowed for roughly maybe 2 to 4 MB worth of data if everyone used SegWit, effectively increasing throughput.
And that meant lower fees, more transactions clearing.
Yep, it helped alleviate congestion, leading to noticeably lower fees for SegWit users, often like a 30–40% saving. And like I said, it was critical groundwork for the Lightning Network to be built securely.
It seems like a really foundational upgrade then. How widely is it used now?
Oh, very widely. Adoption is really high. Something like 85–90% of transactions today use SegWit formats. It's pretty much the standard. Then importantly, it was a soft fork, so it is backward compatible. Older wallets could still function.
Okay, so SegWit was 2017. Then, more recently, Taproot arrived in late 2021. What did Taproot bring to the table?
Taproot was the next major upgrade, building on SegWit. Its goals were primarily focused on improving privacy and making Bitcoin's smart contracting capabilities more powerful and efficient.
More privacy and better smart contracts? How?
It introduced a few key pieces of tech. One was Schnorr signatures.
Okay, different signature scheme. Better how?
Schnorr signatures are generally more efficient than the older ECDSA signatures Bitcoin used. But the really cool property is key aggregation.
Aggregation, meaning?
You can combine multiple signatures, say from a multi-party transaction where several people need to sign off, into what looks like just one single signature on the blockchain.
Whoa. So a complex multi-sig transaction could look exactly the same as a simple single-person payment.
Exactly. That's a massive privacy win. It makes it much harder to tell just by looking at the blockchain what kind of script or conditions were behind a transaction.
That's clever. Less revealing.
Right. And Taproot also brought MST Merkleized abstract syntax trees.
MSC sounds complex.
Haha. The name is a bit intimidating, but the concept is about efficiency for complex scripts. Imagine a smart contract with many different possible conditions or ways it could be spent.
Okay.
With MST, you only need to reveal the specific part of the script, the specific condition that was actually met when you spend the Bitcoin. All the other possible conditions remain hidden and don't take up space on the blockchain.
So again, efficiency saving block space and privacy by not revealing the entire complex contract.
Precisely. And combined with Schnorr signatures and another feature called Taproot wrapping, which makes different output types look uniform, it means complex smart contracts become cheaper, smaller, and much more private on-chain.
So overall benefits. Privacy boost, especially for complex stuff, more efficient use of block space, better smart contract potential, potentially lower fees for these advanced uses.
That's a good summary. It really enhances Bitcoin's capabilities as a programmable settlement layer.
What's the adoption look like for Taproot now? Still early days compared to SegWit.
Yeah, it's definitely growing, but slower. It requires wallets and services to integrate the new address types and features. As of, say, April 2025, maybe around 25–30% of transactions are using the new Taproot outputs. It takes time for ecosystems to upgrade.
Makes sense. Okay, so we have these big protocol upgrades and layer 2s. Are there simpler, maybe more immediate efficiency gains people use, like transaction batching?
Oh yeah, batching is super important, especially for businesses. It's a really straightforward concept.
Just grouping payments together.
Exactly. Instead of, say, an exchange sending out 100 separate withdrawal transactions to 100 different users.
Which would mean 100 separate transaction fees.
Right. They can create one single Bitcoin transaction that has 100 different outputs, one for each user receiving funds.
So one transaction fee covers all those payouts. That must save a lot.
A ton. Especially when fees are high, it dramatically reduces the fee cost per payment, and it's also much more efficient for block space. Instead of 100 transaction headers taking up space, you have just one.
So standard practice for any high-volume service, I assume.
Absolutely. Exchanges, payment processors, anyone sending lots of Bitcoin uses batching. It's just common sense economics.
Okay. And then there are techniques aimed more at individual user privacy, like coin joins and pay join.
Right. These are specifically designed to make blockchain analysis harder to obscure the links between inputs and outputs, basically trying to break the assumption that all inputs in a transaction belong to the same person.
How does coin join work?
CoinJoin is a collaborative process. Multiple users coordinate, often through specialized software or services, to combine their individual transactions into one large joint transaction.
So you mix your coins with other people's coins in one big transaction.
Essentially, yeah. The resulting transaction has many inputs and many outputs, and it becomes much harder for an outside observer to definitively link specific inputs to specific outputs. It introduces ambiguity, like shuffling multiple decks of cards together.
A digital blender, yeah.
Yeah.
Makes sense. What about pay join then?
PayJoin is a bit different. It's a collaborative transaction between just two parties, the sender and the receiver.
The receiver gets involved in constructing the transaction.
Yes, the receiver actually contributes one of their own Bitcoin inputs to the transaction that pays them.
Huh. Why would they do that?
It further breaks the common input ownership heuristic, the assumption that all inputs belong to the sender. It makes the transaction look less standard, potentially confusing analysis tools. And sometimes it can even result in slightly lower overall fees because you might consolidate inputs more efficiently.
Interesting. So both are tools for enhancing privacy on chain. Are they widely used?
There are definitely dedicated wallets and services that facilitate them. Things like Wasabi Wallet, Samurai Wallet, Join Market come to mind. But it's fair to say they're still used by a relatively small, privacy-focused segment of Bitcoin users compared to the overall volume. It adds complexity that maybe not everyone needs or wants.
Right. A niche but important tool set for those who prioritize that privacy. It really feels like there's just constant development happening. Any other sort of cutting-edge things on the horizon?
Yeah, there are always new ideas bubbling up. Two that are generating some buzz lately are state chains and RGB.
State chains. What's the concept there?
It's a really novel idea for potentially completely off-chain transfers of entire Bitcoin UTXOs, unspent transaction outputs, basically lumps of Bitcoin.
Completely off-chain. Not even a final settlement like Lightning.
The idea is the ownership transfer happens off-chain using some clever cryptography involving multi-party computation and usually a coordinating server called a state chain operator. The Bitcoin itself remains locked in a special on-chain address, but the control over it can be passed off-chain without any Bitcoin transaction appearing on the main ledger.
Wow. That sounds potentially very fast and very private if it works securely.
Exactly. Big potential implications for scalability and privacy. But it's definitely still experimental, early stages, limited real-world use so far, an area to watch.
Okay. And RGB, you mentioned asset issuance.
Right. RGB is a protocol aimed at bringing sophisticated token issuance and smart contracts to Bitcoin, but doing it in a very scalable and private way using something called client-side validation.
Client-side validation,
Yeah.
meaning the user's software checks the rules, not the whole Bitcoin network.
That's the core idea. The actual token transfers and contract state changes happen off-chain, managed by the users involved. But these changes are cryptographically committed to the main Bitcoin blockchain, often within regular Bitcoin transactions, so you inherit Bitcoin's security and censorship resistance.
So you could issue, say, stable coins or NFTs on Bitcoin, but most of the data stays off the main chain.
Potentially, yes. The goal is high scalability because the Bitcoin blockchain isn't validating every single token transfer, and enhanced privacy because the details aren't broadcast publicly. It leverages Bitcoin as a trust anchor and settlement layer.
Again, sounds powerful, but probably complex to implement.
It is. Lots of active development, growing developer interest, but still pretty early in terms of widespread production use. Another one to keep an eye on for sure.
So, stepping back from all these specific technologies, the big picture seems to be that there's no single magic bullet for scaling or adding features. It's more like layers.
That's exactly the right way to think about it. It's a layered approach. You've got the base layer, Bitcoin itself, layer 1. That's being improved with things like SegWit, Taproot, Schnorr signatures, focusing on ultimate security, decentralization, and being a solid foundation.
Okay, layer 1 is the bedrock.
Then you build on top. Layer 2 is primarily about scaling payments. That's where the Lightning Network fits in for fast, cheap transactions.
Got it. payments rail.
Then you have side chains and federations like Liquid or RSK, maybe drive chains in the future.
Yeah.
These offer more specialized functionalities, maybe different trust models, things like advanced smart contracts or high-speed institutional settlement.
Specialized extensions.
Right. And then kind of interwoven with all that, you have efficiency tools like batching, privacy techniques like CoinJoin, better wallet software,
Right.
things that improve usability, privacy, and efficiency across the different layers.
It's like Bitcoin is becoming this modular system. The core stays strong and conservative, but you can plug in different modules for different needs.
That's a great way to put it. It allows Bitcoin to potentially serve multiple purposes. Digital gold, yes, but also potentially everyday money via Lightning, or a settlement layer for complex financial contracts via sidechains, or Taproot-enabled scripts.
While keeping that core protocol incredibly secure and resistant to change.
Exactly. This compartmentalized innovation lets it evolve without compromising those fundamental principles that made it valuable in the first place.
Okay, so just to quickly recap for everyone listening, we've talked about how layer 2 solutions like Lightning are tackling fast, cheap payments, how sidechains like Liquid and RSK add specialized features like confidentiality or smart contracts.
And how upgrades to Bitcoin itself, like SegWit and Taproot, have improved efficiency, privacy, and enabled these other layers, plus those practical tools like batching and privacy methods.
Right. And the underlying theme from the sources you shared seems to be addressing those initial trade-offs, making Bitcoin more usable for more things, more private, more capable.
Without breaking what makes Bitcoin Bitcoin, it's about expanding the possibilities while staying true to the core. Those are really the key takeaways from the material.
Absolutely. Now, obviously, we've covered a lot of ground here. This might just spark more questions for you. Maybe you're now thinking, okay, how many people actually use Lightning daily? Or what specific things are institutions doing on Liquid?
Or maybe what kind of smart contracts are really feasible with Taproot. Each of these is a deep dive in itself.
For sure. There's always more to explore. Which leads us nicely into a final thought to leave you with.
Considering this increasingly layered, almost modular ecosystem developing around Bitcoin, what do you think will be the biggest driver of its future mainstream adoption?
Will it be the sheer convenience of near-instant, super low-fee payments becoming widespread?
Or will it be the enhanced privacy features attracting individuals and maybe even institutions looking for confidentiality?
Or perhaps it's the potential for entirely new kinds of decentralized finance or other applications being built on this evolving foundation.
Faster payments, better privacy, or new applications. Which one, or maybe what combination, will really push Bitcoin into the mainstream? Something to ponder as this evolution continues.